This is the state of the world. Catalytic conversations with leaders who are reinventing the web and building trusted technologies for the future of humanity. Brought to you by EXO, the Internet of Impact.
So welcome to today's show, everyone, and welcome particularly to Cuautemoc. Great to have you on the show. We get to talk a lot. I think we were joking earlier that we have a kind of daily call with each other, but we don't often get to stop for 15 minutes and just think about kind of what's really on our minds. You know, what's at the back of the mind, what's coming through as being really important observations about the state of the world and what we're doing about that. And so it's great to have you on the show. And as an introduction, please feel free to tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Perfect. Thanks again, Sean. Really nice having you on the show today. And yeah, as you indicate, we've been discussing about technology for many months now. And yeah, very good to take a moment to think about what's going on with the world, and particularly around technology, as we both in this field. But yeah, a little bit about myself, Cuautemoc Weber. I live in Sweden. I've been in tech for about 22, 23 years, starting from the .com era to mobile internet. I was early on in the migration from 2G to 3G. Deep in the technology, I saw, even before people had iPhones and Androids, what was the experience to have mobile technology and what the impact of that technology would do in the world. And then eventually over the years, I moved to an internet provider, well, a browser, which some people know as Opera browser. Yeah, it's been around for about 25 years. And I've been working there for about 9 years doing business development. So I had the unique experience and opportunity to travel all the corners of the world and see firsthand the impact of technology. So that's a little bit about myself. Fantastic.
And so when you got out of bed this morning, or when you were thinking about coming onto this podcast, what was it that kind of got your attention about the state of the world? Of course, there are many things that interest us and many things that we can be concerned about or excited about. But what's got your attention at the moment?
Yeah, I would say, of course, climate has a big attention. But before you tackle climate, you got to tackle, I think, a more basic need, which is access to financial inclusion around the world. I think that's a big problem that people don't realize. But, as I indicated, I've been traveling emerging markets for 20 years, and I've seen the opportunity of emerging technologies and the benefit that those technologies bring to create better financial inclusion. And I think we're in the precipice of a new financial inclusion wave through blockchain. So I'm pretty excited to see that, because I think for the first time, technology is allowing for really mass accessibility to financial inclusion that has not been possible before. So I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest. So yeah, but I would say financial inclusion, I think that's, to me, in the back of the mind on a daily basis, in all levels, right? From emerging markets to even advanced markets, right? People need to understand the financial inclusion aspect of life, the better of living. With that, then you're able to go to the upper states of providing better society structure, and eventually taking care of the world that we all live in, right? Which is quite important for the next generations to come.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for those of us who live in more kind of developed settings, financial inclusion has perhaps different, we have different ideas about it, and maybe even sometimes think that in terms of the current economy, financial inclusion means financial entrapment with lots of debt and so on. So kind of what is it for you that is like the story of financial inclusion that is the opportunity and the need?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating story about money, right? Money's been around since the beginning of humanity, right? There's exchange of value. And when I talk about financial inclusion, means a broad aspect of how people exchange value around the world and the systems that have evolved over millennia, right? And as you said, I mean, it's very interesting to see that technology has allowed for faster or better financial inclusion in some areas of the world, but at the same time is deteriorating in other parts of the world, right? At the same time, which is a bit strange. You would imagine that by now, with all this technology, financial inclusion should be equal across the world, across humanity, but it is not. I promise you, it is not. I've seen it, I've lived it. And that's what I get a bit excited about, the potential to have equal financial inclusion for everybody, which is quite exciting to see. Of course, there will be a lot of things happening around this, but for the first time, you have a technology that allows for that kind of equality of financial inclusion without having a background of specific person in terms of the value that you could exchange. It's about value exchange, right?
So with that context, you're working, I think, on an area that is not a typical conversation that we've been having, which tend to be with people working on protocols and on core blockchain technologies and so on. You're working at the client interface, so the apps that people use. And of course, Opera is a really important application for many tens or hundreds of millions of users. And so in the context of what you've just spoken about, what are you most excited about the technologies you're working on and how they have the potential to change that state, particularly in relation to financial inclusion?
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, I saw this very clearly when mobile internet first came, right? I mean, Opera was, one of the innovators of saying, hey, they believed early on in mobile technology, and to bring a new technology into the mass market took a long time, right? It was a lot of trials, a lot of errors, but we learned through the process. There's also, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human and we interact with technology in a different way. Every new technology has a different way of interacting. When it comes to financial inclusion, I see a lot of similarities now, for example, with blockchain, to get with early days of the internet. It was kind of things that people don't think about today, like when you go to a browser, where you do a search, right? But back in those days, it was difficult. I think you probably remember, we got the yellow pages of the internet. You have to go and check the yellow pages and type the domain. That domain will get resolved, and eventually, you mistype something and you didn't end up in that landing page where you get the information. So like Opera, in those cases, developed new technologies like one click to internet, like a small little icon, like a speed dial that we call, in order to make it visual interaction between the user and their favorite site, right? So, I mean, those things would be quite important to think about financial inclusion as well, that sometimes technology is very cumbersome and the user experience and the user journey is really important. And yeah, I've seen that over the last few decades of that evolution of making it more adaptable. The good thing that I see very exciting about emerging markets is that there's an appetite for new technologies because they see the leaps and frogs of the benefit of that technology. I'll give you an example of the first time I went in Bangladesh in 2003, and barely people having no mobile telephony. And then going back, I think the last time I was there is 2017, everybody having smartphone almost. And really the interaction with that technology, quite amazing. Like you really see, but it took a while. So I would say those would be important things to look for.
So what user interfaces meet blockchain, and a lot is said for those of us who have been in blockchain for a long time about the lack of good user interfaces really being the sort of Achilles heel of blockchain technologies. And so what makes Opera different, and what makes what you're working on, the kind of technologies, kind of vision that you have for where to go with these technologies, what makes that different?
Yeah, I think we have this experience of a quarter century of working with complex technologies. A browser is the second most complex piece of software ever built, apart from an operating system. So, of course, you got to think from a human perspective, how do you interact with that technology? And I think we have a lot of experience on the user experience journey and this ability to use that technology. You could say removing the complexity of the technology, making it accessible, and making it understandable from a human point of view. And also about the value, right? The value of the engagement of the user. What is the interaction that they have towards that technology? And then that part, of course, new technologies bring new opportunities, but also new challenges from the UX experience side of things. And I think blockchain and financial inclusion in that sense are two of those kind of merging complex technologies that we'll have to tackle together to make it more adaptable for the users, right? So I think for our point of view, because we have a consumer kind of focus in terms of all the millions of users that we serve, that's going to be an important aspect of us on our side to move forward potentially with this new technology.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I've picked up that differentiates Opera is the innovations that you've had in making Mini a really light browser that doesn't use a lot of data, which is important for loading onto phones that don't have a lot of memory capacity on the phones, as well as for the expensive data plans that people have, particularly in Africa and other developing parts of the world. So that's one area of innovation that you've really kind of waxed. And the other is that you're one of the first mobile browsers to have a built-in crypto wallet. Now, in the context of blockchain transactions generally being slow, expensive for some chains, what does that mean for your roadmap to continue to innovate the agility, the low cost and ease of use of these technologies, particularly in the settings that I've described and on the kind of low end devices that people use, that many hundreds of millions of people use?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. I mean, so again, these new technologies pose some interesting challenges, which is very thin clients where you have to interact with the blockchain. It's not a simple thing to do. As you indicated, Opera has a built-in crypto non-custodial wallet inside the browser. The browser itself, it's a lot of millions of lines of code, so it's a very big type of application for the full-fledged browser. When you have to do it on a web thin client, you have to look into things like, as you said, what is the APK size? You know, I mean, it's very difficult to provide a full client with a full ding and whistles inside the client side. So a lot of the technology that we built, for example, in Opera Mini, it's very heavy on the back end. That means that you're able to create a very thin client, which doesn't take a lot of memory, doesn't take a lot of space in terms of the device. And then it's accessibility to everybody, right? You don't have to install it. You don't have to go through Google Play or Apple. It's just available directly on the internet. So those will be the kind of points that we'll be looking at for better adoption of this new emerging technology. And for sure, there'll be some headaches that we'll have to maneuver around in terms of authentication and so forth. But, you know, with time, we will figure out those challenges. But as you see, I think emerging markets are in a sweet spot for adapting this new blockchain technology, because it's not that there's an appetite for financial inclusion. It's a must, it's a need for them, right? It's a very clear aspect of bettering themselves, and people are pretty smart in these emerging markets. You know, it's quite amazing how fast they adapt to technology because they see the immediate benefit. So they'll figure things out even before we do as a technology partner, and they will guide us. I think at the end of the day, they will tell us like, hey, what's going on? How do they want things to happen? And if we listen to the end clients, at the end of the day, we'll be successful in this new journey, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an astounding and quite profoundly important. You have hundreds of millions of users. You have a very strong focus on blockchain. And really, this seems like one of the major kind of rails to get into where blockchain technologies are needed. So, so really fantastic, great work. So as we end off, we're close to the end of our 15 minutes. What sort of catalytic question or idea or way of thinking would you want to give people as a take-home message from this conversation?
Yeah, I would say, you know, new technologies are always, you know, long adapting. And, you know, what we see right now, I think within blockchain and where Opera came from, it was similar to what we started at the beginning, right? So we're in a very interesting period of time where there are some really innovative technologies coming out that in general are going to create a better society for all of us, right? Both in mature markets and emerging markets, more fair, more accessible. I think that's a very important part. And the thing that I really, really love about technology is just it creates a kind of plateau for everybody to have equal rights. And I think that's very important for us as a species to evolve further. So I see technology as a catalyst for this evolution of humanity.
Yeah, again, thanks very much, Cuautemoc. I think it's been a great conversation and look forward to having many, many more.
Absolutely. Super excited. And thanks again, Sean, and really excited about what you guys are doing at Excel. Really proud.
Thank you so much. Great.
Take care. Bye, everybody. Cheers.